Let me throw this at you. Our training zones are like spider webs. Let me explain. Periodization has been proven time and time again to be the best training method that's out there. Periodization is taking different training zones or periods or phases, and you basically break your whole training year up into these phases or periods. And every phase or period, hence the word periodization, every period focuses on a specific aspect of fitness or training. This block is about gaining aerobic fitness, and you've got this period here that's focused on more race intense efforts like VO2, etc., etc. But I think one important flaw to point out with our thinking about periodization, and at least I fall into this, is that thinking so much about periodization, we tend to put our different training zones in boxes. My endurance riding is in this box over here, totally separate, and then totally interdependently over here is my VO2 box of training over here, and those two things are separate and they never touch. I think fitness is way more complicated than this. There's a lot more going on when we train than those two boxes being totally separate. Now, when I visualize or force myself to visualize these training zones, what I want to try to do is think about all of my training zones being different boxes, but they're all connected by strings or spider webs. And as one box goes up, the endurance box goes up, all the spider webs of the other consecutive boxes go up as well. It raises my VO2, it raises my threshold, it raises my sprints. However, the main one getting raised up is endurance, and then you've got threshold and VO2, and it depends on which phase or what your focus is for your training right now, that which box is raising. But it's more complicated than just that box is going up. It's that box is going up and it's affecting the other boxes around it or the other aspects of your fitness. And I say all this to say that there are certain things that we can do that really focus in on increasing our FTP, and I want to talk about 3 of those things in this video. Alright, so why I'm even thinking about this in the first place is because I was starting to think about my preparation for the 2023 season and what I could really focus on improving, and 2 things come to mind. Sprinting, which I've never focused on and have never been good at and really need to get better at because crit racing involves a lot of sprinting, it turns out, and raising my FTP. It's been years and years since I've really seen a significant raise in my FTP. It's just been a few ticks this way and a few ticks that way, and I've really generally stayed in like the same, what seems like 10 watt range for the last, as long as I can remember. So I'm thinking, and maybe that's because I'm near my genetic ceiling, which is a sad yet accurate truth that I guess I just have to accept. But at this point, I really want to optimize my training, and so how can I do that? And so I did some research on how can I really increase my FTP, and here's what I've come up with. Now, my first thought when I think about how to raise my FTP is to increase my overall training volume. If I've trained this many hours per week and this many hours per month and this many hours per year for the last couple years, what can I do to increase that training volume even just a little bit from week to week, which would add up and add up and add up. And this is so important because we all know how important that huge aerobic foundation is to the rest of our training. And I think that is where everything starts and everything else is built from that. So obviously if you can increase that, you can increase FTP. So as I think about this, I think about all the running I did last year. I love to run. Most of this training, however, I'm talking about would be endurance focused, and a lot of that would be on the bike. I'm not saying don't ride your bike, just run. I'm saying you can do some bike riding, but if adding in some running and some other forms of cross training increase your overall training volume, then that's a good thing if it's at that aerobic zone. So if I'm riding, so this is what happened last year when I was training for an ultra marathon, was I was riding my bike less per week, but when you added on all the running on top of that, I ended up training more hours each week because of the plus of bikes and runs. So that's good. Overall training volume increase. And little things that you can do like that to tweak your training to increase that volume, I think is beneficial. One thing that I've thought about a lot recently is the hidden gem of rowing. I have a rowing machine. I don't use it nearly as much as I'd like to, but I think there's something here, because rowing doesn't beat your body up like running does. It doesn't hurt your joints, and it's not as hard. And since it's indoors, I could really literally do it at any time of the day. And I could just do a couple little 30-minute rowing sessions in the morning or after rides or here and there. Do 3 or 4 of those a week, and that adds in an hour, 2 hours of training volume to my training without really adding in all that soreness that comes with running. I think there's something there. Another little thing that we could do to increase volume is implementing the 2-a-day. Our swimming compatriots over there are famous for this. The early morning swim training and then the after school training that the swimmers do is insane. I hear about this all the time, and maybe they're just tougher than we are and they wake up earlier to get in these awesome early morning swim sessions. But maybe if you just add in, a 1 hour spin once or twice a week in the early morning before you get your day going, that's another easy way to add some volume to your training in an out of the box kind of way. Now, the second thing I think that you can do to increase your FTP is to increase TIZ. What I mean by TIZ is time in zone. I like talking about time in zone. The more time that you can spend in your threshold zone, the more your FTP is going to increase. This totally makes sense, and it's so simple. Oh, I want to increase my FTP? Well, we'll spend more time riding at your FTP. It seems like a no-brainer, and it's worth saying that this actually works. And it works for just about anything in the world. And the technical term for this is actually called desensitization. And it's this theory that the more time you spend doing something, the more your body gets used to doing that something, and the easier or more comfortable it becomes. So if we spend more time riding an FTP, our body gets adapted to that, gets comfortable doing that, and slowly but surely our FTP gets bumped up higher and higher because your body can handle that and it gets comfortable and etc. But we can do this with anything. If you want to run, you keep running and running and running. The more you run, the more your body gets used to it. You want to get better at jumping? Well, jump more, and your body gets more and more adapted to that to jumping. Anything. One tactic that runners employ for their training is this pace running, where if they have a certain pace in mind for a marathon, they try to just extend their run longer and longer at that pace. So, for example, a long-time goal of mine, and I still want to do this, is to get a sub-3 marathon. And I know that if you want to get a sub-3 marathon, you have to be able to run 6:45 mile pace the entire marathon to get sub-3. Now, one strategy that you could employ in this whole desensitization conversation is to just run at 6:45 pace for 4 miles, and then do it at 6 miles, and then do it at 8 miles, and then do it at 10 miles, and then do it all the way up until you get to pretty close to a marathon at that pace. But along the way, you should be getting more and more comfortable at just riding or running at that pace, and hopefully you can do it for the full distance of the race. Now, if we were to take this strategy for cycling, obviously you would take your FTP and try to increase the amount of time that you can ride at that FTP. So if your FTP is 360, then you say 360, I'm going to do that for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to do it for 30 and 40. And the goal should be to get up to 1 hour, because really your FTP is your 1 hour power. So whatever power you can hold for an hour, you know that that's how much time you could spend at that FTP. Now, I'm not saying just huge bouts of 60 minutes at threshold. I'm saying time in zone, meaning maybe you do 4 bouts of 15. 4 times 15 is 60. That's 1 hour of power at that time. And if you want to make it even harder, you can decrease the recovery in between intervals, which is something that I've been playing around with recently, where you do 10 minutes of threshold, but only 2 minutes of recovery in between, and you just do that back to back to back until you get, basically until you can't do it more. But the goal would be to do it 6 times so you get to 1 hour. Pretty sweet, probably uncomfortable, but that's what you got to do to raise your FTP. Now, the third strategy that I would like to employ to increase my FTP would be over-unders training. And this is also a pretty straightforward form of training that a lot of people are familiar with, but the over-unders is that you're riding under your threshold, and then for a certain point you're riding over your threshold. And typically the way I structure these is 5 minutes under your threshold, so you're talking 95% of FTP, and then 1 minute over your threshold at roughly 105 to 120% of FTP. And this really becomes a mental battle because what happens is you can do the 5 minutes of threshold, you can do the 1 minute of VO2, but then when you drop back down to threshold, that's where it gets hard. So if you're talking about those first 6 minutes, the 7th minute is probably the hardest because your body is like telling you to shut down and to stop. We just did VO2, we're dying here, but you put it back at threshold and it has to learn how to deal with that, all that accumulated lactate in the system, while also riding pretty close to that FTP, which is really hard for your body to do. One thing that I think this does is that it induces suffering. This just makes the workout a little bit harder, but you, at the end of the day, you end up spending a lot of time at threshold, which again, back to desensitization, you want to spend time at threshold, but it also kind of tricks you into doing a harder workout because you go back and forth between the threshold and the VO2. And it seems like when you chunk those into smaller portions, the workout goes by quicker. It's more enjoyable. At least that is for me. Those 5-minute unders go by way faster than a 15-minute threshold where I'm just stuck at threshold. So it seems like when you add in these little 1-minute bouts of VO2, it spices up the workout a bit, makes it more enjoyable. And when a workout is more enjoyable, you're gonna do it more often. You're gonna obviously like doing it, and you're gonna be more compliant to that workout. Now obviously there are so many other things that you could probably do to increase your FTP, but these are the top 3 things that come to my mind: increasing volume, increasing your time at threshold, and then throwing in some over-unders work. And all of these are very specific, and the way that I structure this in my training is there's usually, obviously I'm trying to increase volume year-round for the most part, but when it comes to specific threshold training, I usually have 1 or 2 blocks in my periodization calendar where I'm spending 3 weeks really focusing in on threshold and over-unders. Usually I'll do a 3-week block of threshold and then a 3-week block of over-unders back to back. And that's basically a 6-week period of just building FTP with a rest week in between. Now there's all kinds of other things. Don't think that when you get to your VO2 intervals after that FTP just disappears. Obviously, like I said at the beginning of this video, doing other forms of training is going to also increase your FTP. These are just the ways that you can really hone in and focus on raising that FTP. The best thing that you can do, now this is a little rabbit hole, but I love rabbit holes. You guys love rabbit holes too, I know it. Did you know rabbit hole came from the book Alice in Wonderland? Who knew that? That's a rabbit hole about a rabbit hole. There you go. What was my first rabbit hole? Oh, right, yes. What you want to know what the one workout is, or one style of training that raises all the boxes the best. You know, if you don't have time to train this box, this box, this box, this box, and you really just need to raise them all as fast as you can, 30-30s or Tabata style intervals where you go all out with minimal recovery in between those, that's how you do that. That is the best way to increase all the fitness levels really quickly. It's not the best way to train. Periodization is the best way to train. But if you need quick fitness, Tabata drills is how you do it. That raises the spider webs quicker and faster, but it's just not as long lasting. So if you like this video, feel free to share it with your friends. If you want to support me, there's ways that you can do that down below. I'm not going to, drag it on out. You guys can look below. You've got Ignition Coach Co. where you can hire a coach. I just said I wasn't going to drag it out, but now I am. You've got Ignition Coach Co. If you're looking for a one-on-one coach, you can support these videos by hiring a coach, and obviously support yourself by hiring a coach, because you get faster when you have a coach. So hire a coach. You've got training plans. If you're not ready for that coaching experience, you can check out some training plans. And then obviously, if you just want to hand me your money, there's a Patreon link down there as well. Obviously, all of these forms of you giving me your money in some form is showing that you're supporting these videos. And when I see people that like these videos, obviously leaving the comments and sharing and subscribing and all of that, it lets me know that these are worthwhile and that I should keep doing them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you.